I was polishing the same damn glass for 5 minutes straight when she walked in, rain-soaked and magnificent. Most nights at the Copper still blend together in my memory. A carousel of faces asking for liquid courage. But that Wednesday in Durham changed everything. Outside, thunder cracked like it was trying to split the sky open, while inside, my heart did something similar. "Got anything that'll warm a soul betrayed by both weather and women?" she asked, wringing out her fiery red hair. Droplets scattered across my freshly wiped bar, like tiny prisms catching the amber lights overhead. "Depends on how deep the betrayal runs," I replied, finally setting down the glass I'd nearly polished into oblivion. She slid onto the bar stool with a grace that didn't match her drenched appearance, her gray eyes meeting mine with unexpected intensity. Deep enough that I walked 3 miles in this storm, rather than spend another minute in that apartment. Something in my chest tightened. I'd walked similar miles, though mine had been under clear skies with equally stormy emotions. The bar was nearly empty, just a couple regulars nursing their usual poisons in the corner booth. I had time for her story, even though I'd sworn off getting involved with customers after the Jennifer disaster 6 months ago. "I'm Faith," I said, reaching for my special reserve bourbon that I definitely wasn't supposed to offer to random customers. "Daisy," she answered, watching my hands as I worked. The smell of rain clung to her, mixing with something else, a subtle perfume like autumn leaves and sandalwood. "Do you always spoil strangers with the good stuff hidden under the bar?" I smiled, despite myself. "Only the ones who look like they might appreciate the difference." I crafted a drink my grandmother taught me: bourbon, bitters, a dash of maple, and orange peel flamed just right so the oils released with a scent that always reminded me of possibilities. The glass clinked against the wood as I slid it toward her, our fingertips brushing momentarily. Hers were ice cold from the rain. "This isn't on the menu," she said, not a question. "Neither is walking 3 miles in a thunderstorm." She took a sip, and her eyes closed briefly. When they opened again, they held something new, curiosity replacing pain, if only temporarily. "You've got magic hands, Faith the bartender." Then the power went out. The sudden darkness felt intimate, dangerous, a forced confession booth where I could only hear her breathing across from me. Emergency lights flickered on seconds later, casting everything in a soft blue glow that made her look like she was underwater. "Should I take this as a sign to go?" Her voice had dropped to something just above a whisper. I reached for the antique lighter I kept in my apron, and lit the candles lined along the back bar, one by one, creating a wall of tiny flames between us. Or maybe it's a sign to stay. We talked until closing, about everything and nothing, about how she collected vintage jazz records but didn't own a player, about the scar on my wrist from a childhood accident involving my father's fishing tackle, about how we both secretly preferred rainy days to sunny ones. What I didn't tell her was how her laugh made my fingers tremble slightly while mixing her second drink. What she didn't mention was why exactly she'd been walking in the rain, or whose name was tattooed on her wrist but carefully concealed with bracelets. When our knees touched under the bar after the power returned, neither of us moved away. 3 days later, I would see her again at the flea market across town, both of us reaching for the same tarnished cocktail shaker. But that night, watching her walk back into the rain with my number carefully folded in her pocket, I couldn't have possibly known she'd already been inside my apartment. The photograph of me as a child that went missing from my mantle last week was sitting in her bag, alongside a collection of others, all women who looked remarkably like me. Saturday mornings had always been sacred to me, the only time my chaotic bartending life allowed for actual daylight activities. This particular morning found me hunting through Durham's biggest flea market, searching for vintage glassware to replace what my ex had accidentally broken during our final argument. I was crouched between tables of junk when I spotted it, a perfectly preserved Art Deco cocktail shaker, silver with geometric etching that caught the morning sunlight. My fingers had just brushed its cool surface when another hand reached for it simultaneously. I looked up, ready to politely battle for my find, and found myself staring into now familiar stormy gray eyes. "Faith?" Daisy's surprise seemed genuine, her red hair pulled back in a loose braid, nothing like the rain-drenched woman from Wednesday night. "Stalking me already?" I grinned, neither of us removing our hands from the cocktail shaker. "Clearly I should be asking you that question." Something flickered across her face, caution perhaps, before being replaced with a smile that transformed her entire presence. Though, I admit, I've been thinking about that mystery drink you made me. The elderly vendor watched us with amusement. Been saving that piece for someone special. Belonged to a speakeasy bartender back in the day, he said, nodding at our hands still touching over the silver surface. Seems it's chosen both of you. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but Daisy just laughed. I'll arm wrestle you for it, she suggested, winking at the old man. Or, I countered, we could split the cost and share custody. The market around us buzzed with weekend shoppers, but somehow we'd created a small bubble of calm. The scent of fresh kettle corn mixed with the dusty smell of old books from a nearby stall, and somewhere a street musician played jazz that seemed to follow us as we wandered away from the shaker I'd insisted she take. You surrendered too easily, Daisy noted, carrying her treasure wrapped in newspaper. I figured bartenders would fight to the death for proper tools. I shrugged, pretending nonchalance while actually cataloging everything about her. How she walked slightly pigeon-toed, how sunlight caught gold flecks in her gray eyes I hadn't noticed in the bar's dim lighting. Maybe I'm playing the long game. For 3 hours, we lost ourselves in the market's maze. She knew obscure facts about vinyl records and could identify real silver by its weight alone. I taught her how to spot genuine mid-century barware from fakes, and confessed my weakness for tacky salt and pepper shakers shaped like animals. What exactly is the long game? She finally asked as we sat on a bench, sharing a paper bag of still warm cinnamon donuts. Her fingers were dusted with sugar that she didn't bother to wipe away. For a moment I considered playing it safe, but something in the open-air market made me braver than I'd been behind my protective bar. The drink you enjoyed the other night, it would taste even better in proper glassware, at my place. Her eyes widened slightly, but instead of answering, she reached over and brushed sugar from the corner of my mouth with her thumb. The touch lingered, deliberate. I should warn you, she said quietly. I'm not looking for anything complicated. Just drinks, I assured her, though the tremble in my voice betrayed me. Nothing complicated about appreciating good bourbon in the right glass. By sunset, we were climbing the stairs to my third-floor apartment, arms laden with our purchases, the cocktail shaker, 4 etched highball glasses, a brass pineapple ice bucket, and a bizarre lamp shaped like a monkey that Daisy had insisted I needed. Wait, she said suddenly as I unlocked my door. Something in her voice made me turn. Before we go in, there's something I should. But then my neighbor's cat darted between our legs into my apartment, breaking whatever confession had been forming on her lips. You were saying? I prompted, after we'd settled in my living room, drinks in hand as promised. Nothing important, she smiled, but her eyes drifted to my mantelpiece, lingering on the empty space where my childhood photo had once sat. Lovely place you have, it feels familiar somehow. When her lips finally met mine hours later, they tasted of bourbon and secrets, and I was already too intoxicated by her to notice the way she'd carefully angled her phone toward my bookshelf while I wasn't looking. These past weeks with Daisy had been a revelation, like discovering a rare spirit hidden behind the bottom shelf offerings. Our nightly texts had become morning calls, and occasional drinks had transformed into regular dinners. I still couldn't believe this was happening to me. Faith Murphy, the woman who'd sworn off relationships after finding her ex in bed with the hostess from the restaurant next door. I was prepping for my evening shift when my phone vibrated against the counter. Daisy's name flashed on the screen, but instead of her usual flirty message, there was just one word: help. My heart lurched. I called immediately, fingers trembling as I pressed the phone to my ear. Faith? Her voice was choked with tears. It's Apollo. Something's wrong. He won't stand up and he's breathing funny and I don't know what to. She broke off with a sob that sent ice through my veins. I'd only met her rescue dog twice, a gentle giant of a Great Dane with soulful eyes and a tendency to lean his entire weight against your legs when he wanted attention. Daisy adored him like a child. I'm coming right now. Which vet are you going to? I was already grabbing my keys, my shift forgotten. 20 minutes later, I burst through the doors of Durham Animal Hospital to find Daisy curled in on herself in a plastic chair, her face buried in her hands. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and fear, that particular blend of anxiety that permeates all medical facilities, human or animal. Hey, I whispered, dropping to my knees in front of her. Her hands were ice cold when I took them in mine. Talk to me. She looked up, mascara tracked down her cheeks like rain down a window. They think it's gastric torsion. They're prepping him for emergency surgery right now. Her voice cracked. I signed the papers, but I can't. How much? I asked, understanding immediately. Daisy worked at a small bookstore that she loved, but that paid barely above minimum wage. 5,000, she whispered, like the number itself was obscene. Just for the surgery. Recovery and aftercare will be more. I had exactly $2,143 in savings, not nearly enough. But I offered it anyway, squeezing her hands as she shook her head. I can't take your money, Faith. It's not taking if I'm offering. Hours passed in that waiting room, the vinyl chairs sticking to the backs of my thighs as summer heat seeped through the windows despite the struggling air conditioning. Daisy rested her head on my shoulder, her breathing occasionally hitching with suppressed sobs. I wondered about the story behind Apollo, about why this dog mattered so much, but knew better than to ask. Not now. The surgeon finally emerged, still in scrubs, looking exhausted but smiling. We got the stomach untwisted in time. He'll need careful monitoring and a special diet going forward, but with proper care, he should make a full recovery. Daisy collapsed against me, her body shaking with relief. Later, they let us see Apollo, groggy and pitiful with an IV in his leg and a plastic cone around his neck that he already hated. When Daisy kissed his broad head and whispered promises that everything would be okay, I had to turn away to hide my own tears. The financial discussion afterward was brutal. Payment plans were discussed. Credit cards were maxed out. Still, we were thousands short, with follow-up care looming. That night, we sat on the floor of Daisy's apartment, Apollo snoring softly in his bed nearby, a bottle of cheap whiskey between us, a far cry from the artisanal spirits I usually served. Remember those videos we took at your place, with the fancy cocktails? Daisy asked suddenly, her voice hollow with exhaustion. I nodded, remembering how she'd insisted on filming me demonstrating a flaming cocktail technique, laughing as I hammed it up for her phone camera. What if? She hesitated, taking another sip directly from the bottle before passing it to me. What if we did something like that? Online? People raise money for all sorts of things now. Like a GoFundMe? I asked, the whiskey burning down my throat. No, like content, silly videos. You teaching cocktail tricks, me being your assistant. Her eyes took on a feverish light. People love that stuff, right? Quirky skills, pretty girls. She stopped, blushing. I stared at her, this woman I was falling for despite my best defenses, and saw both desperation and determination in her face. Apollo whimpered in his sleep, his enormous body looking vulnerable in recovery. You want us to become internet cocktail performers? To save your dog? She nodded slowly. I know it sounds crazy, but we need money fast, and... Let's do it, I interrupted, surprising myself with my conviction. Right now. That's how, at 2 a.m., slightly drunk and completely sleep-deprived, we filmed our first video, me flipping bottles while Daisy provided increasingly ridiculous commentary, both of us dissolving into giggles every few minutes. Apollo making a brief cameo with his cone of shame. We uploaded it with a simple caption about raising funds for emergency vet bills, then collapsed into Daisy's bed, too exhausted to think about what we'd just done. Neither of us could have possibly imagined what would happen when Durham woke up to our ridiculous midnight creation. I woke to Daisy frantically shaking my shoulder, her phone thrust in front of my face before my eyes could even focus. The bright screen showed a number that made no sense to my sleep-addled brain. 103,472. Views, Faith. Over 100,000 views overnight. Her hair was a wild mess, eyes wide with disbelief. And people are donating to Apollo's vet fund link. We've already raised $800. I sat up, instantly awake. That's impossible. But it wasn't. Somehow, our drunken, giggly video had struck a chord. Comments flooded in, some admiring my bartending skills, others gushing over Apollo's cone of shame appearance, and many requesting more content from the hot bartender and her adorable sidekick. I guess people really like watching women make fools of themselves while mixing drinks, I muttered, scrolling through comments with increasing amazement. Daisy threw her arms around me, nearly knocking us both off the bed. They like watching you, Faith. You're a natural performer. 2 days and 4 videos later, Apollo's entire vet bill was covered. We celebrated with takeout Chinese food eaten straight from the containers, sitting on Daisy's living room floor while Apollo dozed nearby, his cone occasionally bumping into furniture when he shifted positions. "Should we stop now?" I asked, watching Daisy separate her rice with meticulous precision. We raised what we needed. She looked up, chopsticks paused mid-air. "Do you want to stop?" The truth was, I didn't. Behind my bar, I was confident and in control. But these videos had awakened something I hadn't known existed, a performative side that thrived on the immediate feedback of likes and comments. More than that, I loved the way Daisy looked at me when I was in the middle of a particularly impressive trick. Let's keep going, I decided. Just for fun. That afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but Daisy gestured for me to pick up while she adjusted the makeshift lighting setup we'd created for our next video. "Is this Faith Murphy, the booze babe of Durham?" a perky voice asked. I nearly hung up. The what now? "This is Caitlin Peters from WTVD. We'd love to interview you and your partner about your viral fundraising campaign for your dog. Our viewers are going crazy for your story." And just like that, we were sitting across from a blonde reporter with teeth so white they practically reflected the studio lights. The interview was quick, focused on Apollo's recovery and our heartwarming social media campaign. The reporter kept referring to us as the Booze Babes of Durham, a nickname apparently coined by someone in their comments section. "So what's next for you two?" the reporter asked, leaning forward with practiced interest. Daisy and I exchanged glances. We hadn't discussed next. "More videos," Daisy answered confidently. "We're thinking of starting a series on forgotten classic cocktails with modern twists." I tried not to show my surprise. This was news to me. Later that night, after the segment aired and our follower count doubled, we sat at my kitchen counter planning what had somehow become our joint social media venture. "You could have mentioned the classic cocktail series idea before announcing it to all of Durham," I said, but there was no real annoyance in my voice. Daisy blushed. "It just came to me. You don't have to." "I love it," I interrupted. "I've been wanting to explore pre-prohibition recipes forever." Her smile was brighter than the studio lights had been. Our fifth video was uploading when my phone chimed with a text from a number I'd deleted but still recognized. "Jennifer, my ex. Saw you on the news," the message read. "Those forgotten classic cocktails you're planning? Those were my ideas we talked about last year. Nice of you to give credit." My stomach dropped. She wasn't entirely wrong. We had discussed vintage recipes when we were together. But the concept hadn't been solely hers, and I certainly hadn't stolen it. "Everything okay?" Daisy asked, noticing my expression. I forced a smile, tucking my phone away. "Just my ex being my ex?" Daisy's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't press. Instead, she leaned against me, her head on my shoulder as we watched our view count climb. "This is crazy, right? That people care about us mixing drinks?" "About Apollo," I corrected. "They care about Apollo." She turned, her face inches from mine. "No, Faith. They care about you. The way you move behind that bar like it's an extension of yourself. The way you talk about flavors like they're old friends. The way you..." She stopped, suddenly self-conscious. "The way I what?" I whispered. But before she could answer, my phone rang again. Jennifer's number. I silenced it, but the moment had shattered. I couldn't shake the creeping feeling that as our online presence grew, so would complications I wasn't prepared to face, starting with an ex who felt entitled to credit for ideas she'd never actually pursued. "Let's make another video," I suggested, desperate to recapture the light-hearted feeling from earlier. What I didn't say was how terrified I was becoming of the spotlight we'd accidentally created, and how addicted I already was to being in it with Daisy. Apollo's recovery progressed better than expected. The cone came off, the stitches dissolved, and his appetite returned with a vengeance. Every milestone was documented for our now substantial audience, who cheered him on with heart emojis and donations that had long since exceeded his medical bills. What we hadn't anticipated was the darker side of sudden internet fame. "Faith, look at this," Daisy said one evening as we prepared for a live stream. She turned her phone toward me, showing a comment thread speculating about our relationship status in disturbing detail. "Just ignore it," I advised, measuring bitters with careful precision. But my hand trembled slightly, betraying my unease. The comments had been getting increasingly personal, Questions about where I lived, requests to meet up, even a few disturbing messages describing what these strangers wanted to do to me. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they called the plain sidekick just riding your coattails. Her voice aimed for humor but landed somewhere closer to hurt. I set down the bottle and took her hands. You know that's bullshit. This whole thing was your idea. You're the brains behind the operation. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Something had shifted between us in the 3 weeks since our accidental fame began. What started as a desperate fundraiser had morphed into a genuine business opportunity, with sponsors reaching out and follower counts climbing daily. We were no longer just Faith and Daisy. We were content creators with an audience to satisfy. The live stream that night started like any other. Me behind my makeshift home bar, Daisy reading questions from viewers. Apollo lounging regally in the background as our mascot. But halfway through demonstrating a smoked old-fashioned, a username appeared in the comments that made my blood run cold. Jennifer was right. My ex had found us. Jennifer's comments started innocently enough, complimenting my technique while subtly reminding viewers that she had taught me everything I know. Then they grew pointed, referencing private jokes and intimate details that made me increasingly uncomfortable. Daisy noticed my distraction, smoothly taking over more of the talking while I focused on the drinks with mechanical precision. When we finally ended the stream, I collapsed onto my couch, emotionally drained. Want to talk about Hurricane Jennifer? Daisy asked quietly, sitting beside me but maintaining a careful distance. I stared at the ceiling. Not really. Too bad. She turned to face me fully. Because I'm tired of tiptoeing around whatever history has you looking like you've seen a ghost whenever she appears. Something in her tone made me look at her, really look at her, for the first time that evening. The shadows under her eyes hadn't been there weeks ago. The tense set of her shoulders was new too. She cheated, I said simply. After 3 years together, I found her with someone else. Classic story, boring ending. Daisy nodded slowly. And you're still not over her. I am absolutely over her, I said too quickly. Then why does she still have this power over you? The question hung between us, uncomfortably accurate. I had no answer that wouldn't expose the fragile parts of myself I still guarded carefully. Daisy sighed, reaching to scratch Apollo's ears as he rested his massive head on her lap. You know what? I get it, I really do. She was quiet for so long I thought the conversation was over. Then, when I was 22, I came out to my parents. The shift in topic surprised me. Daisy rarely spoke about her family. They were Southern Baptists, the kind who quoted scripture at breakfast and sent me to church camp every summer. Her voice was steady but distant, as if recounting someone else's story. They gave me 30 minutes to pack a bag and told me not to come back. Daisy. 8 years, she continued, eyes fixed on Apollo. 8 years of silence. No calls on birthdays, no invitations for holidays. My younger sister still talks to me secretly, but last year she got married and I wasn't allowed to attend. I reached for her hand. This time, she was the one trembling. So yeah, I understand carrying ghosts around. Her gray eyes finally met mine. But I also understand that at some point you have to decide if you're going to let them haunt you forever. Something shifted between us in that moment, a deepening, a recognition. I leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Our lips met in a kiss unlike our previous ones, not rushed with new relationship energy or softened by alcohol, but deliberate and questioning. The live stream comments chimed aggressively on both our phones, breaking the moment. Daisy glanced at her screen and laughed shakily. Apparently we left the camera running, she whispered against my lips. We just came out to our entire audience. And just like that, another piece of our private lives became public content, ready to be consumed by strangers who thought they knew us through screens. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was still half asleep. Apollo sprawled across my feet like a living weighted blanket. Daisy was in the shower, humming some indie song I couldn't quite place. I almost dismissed the message as spam until I saw the letterhead, Kingsley Spirits Group. My fingers fumbled to open it properly, heart racing as I read. Impressed by your innovative approach to classic mixology. Brand ambassador position. New York headquarters. Compensation package starting at $85,000 annually plus relocation. I stared at my phone screen, reading and rereading the offer. This was the dream. the kind of opportunity that bartenders like me fantasized about but rarely achieved. Recognition, legitimacy, financial security that didn't depend on tips or whims of customers. "Hey, what's got you looking like you've seen a ghost?" Daisy appeared in my bedroom doorway, hair wrapped in a towel, wearing my old Durham Bulls t-shirt. "Kingsley wants me," I said, still stunned. "They're offering me a job in New York." The towel slipped slightly as her hand dropped to her side. "New York," she repeated, voice carefully neutral. "As a brand ambassador, creating signature cocktails, hosting events, teaching masterclasses." I was babbling, excitement and anxiety battling for dominance. It's everything I ever wanted. Before our videos took off, before Apollo's medical emergency brought us together, this would have been an immediate yes. Now, looking at Daisy's carefully composed expression, I felt torn in ways I hadn't anticipated. "That's amazing," she said finally, smile not quite reaching her eyes. "When would you start?" "They want me there in 3 weeks." 3 weeks, she echoed, turning away to grab clothes from the drawer I'd cleared for her things. Her movements were suddenly mechanical. "Well, we should celebrate, this is huge." The apartment felt smaller than it had 5 minutes ago, the air heavier. That evening, I worked my regular shift at the Copper still, while Daisy filmed solo content for our channel, a Mocktails for Your Massive Dog segment that Apollo participated in with unusual patience. When I returned home, she was asleep on the couch, phone still in hand, apparently having dozed off while editing. I watched her for a moment, cataloging details I'd come to cherish, the tiny scar above her right eyebrow, the way one strand of red hair always curled in the opposite direction from the rest, the slight part of her lips when she slept deeply. The realization hit me with surprising force. I couldn't leave her. Not for New York, not for Kingsley, not for any dream job. But over the next few days, Daisy became increasingly distant. She still smiled for our videos, still curled against me at night, but something fundamental had changed. She was preparing for my departure, I realized, emotionally packing her bags before I could pack mine physically. "Talk to me," I finally demanded after a particularly quiet dinner. "If you don't want me to take the job, just say so." She looked up from her plate, genuinely surprised. "Why would I do that?" "Because maybe I'd stay if you asked." Her fork clattered against her plate. "I would never ask you to give up an opportunity like this, especially not for..." She gestured vaguely between us. "For what? For us?" The words came out sharper than intended. "For something temporary," she finished quietly. The statement hung between us like a physical presence. "Is that what you think this is? Isn't it? Everyone leaves eventually, Faith. Better to acknowledge it than pretend otherwise." I recognized the defense mechanism, the preemptive withdrawal to avoid deeper pain. I'd employed similar tactics after Jennifer, but hearing it from Daisy's lips made something inside me crack. "I'm going to the flea market tomorrow," I said finally, changing the subject. "Need to clear my head." She nodded, relief evident in her posture at the conversational detour. "I have brunch with my sister anyway. She's passing through town." We slept on opposite sides of the bed that night, a careful 6 inches maintained between us like a demilitarized zone. The flea market was crowded the next morning, summer heat already building despite the early hour. I wandered aimlessly, thoughts too tangled to focus on finding anything specific. Then I saw it, tucked between overpriced vintage cameras and questionable, antique jewelry, a child's music box with painted roses along its wooden lid. My breath caught. Weeks ago, during one of our late-night conversations, Daisy had described the music box her grandmother had given her, the one her parents had thrown out along with her other belongings after disowning her. This wasn't just similar, from her description, it was identical. "That just came in yesterday," the seller told me when I asked to examine it closer. "Estate sale over in Chapel Hill. Old lady passed with no family to claim her things." When I opened it, the tinkling melody of Over the Rainbow confirmed what I already knew. Inside the lid was a faded inscription, "To my darling Daisy, may you always find your way home. Love, Grandma Rose." I paid without haggling, hands shaking as I carried Daisy's lost treasure toward home, suddenly certain about New York, about us, about everything. I burst through my apartment door, the music box clutched to my chest like something infinitely precious, which it was. My mind raced with how I'd present it to Daisy, imagining her face when she recognized her grandmother's gift. This would change everything. This would show her that not all precious things were lost forever. But my apartment was empty, Daisy still at brunch with her sister. I set the music box on the coffee table and paced, rehearsing what I would say when she returned. My phone pinged with a notification. Time for our scheduled afternoon live stream. I'd completely forgotten. With shaking hands, I set up the camera and mixed a drink I'd been developing all week, a bittersweet concoction I'd privately named New York Decision in my head. Viewers joined quickly, comments flooding in with their usual enthusiasm. I tried to maintain my typical energy, explaining the flavor profile and technique, while glancing repeatedly at the door, expecting Daisy any minute. "Where's your other half today?" someone commented. "She'll be joining soon," I answered, forcing a smile. But as minutes ticked by and Daisy didn't appear, uncomfortable questions multiplied in the comment section. Then, like conjuring her with thoughts alone, Daisy walked in. Her face was blotchy, eyes red-rimmed in a way that makeup couldn't hide. Something had happened at brunch. She froze when she saw me filming. "You started without me. I thought you'd be back earlier," I explained, motioning her to join me. "Come on, I'm making that new drink I told you about." She hesitated before stepping into frame, her smile so obviously false it hurt to witness. "Sorry I'm late, everyone," she announced to the camera. "Family drama, you know how it is." The livestream continued with excruciating awkwardness. Our usual chemistry replaced by stilted interactions and long pauses. Viewers noticed immediately, comments shifting from recipes to concerned questions about whether we were fighting. "Let's address the elephant in the room," Daisy suddenly announced, setting down her glass with unnecessary force. "Faith got an amazing job offer in New York. She'll be leaving Durham soon." The statement hit like a physical blow. I hadn't made my decision yet, at least I hadn't announced it. "Actually," I began, but Daisy continued as if I hadn't spoken. "So our channel will be changing. I'll still do videos with Apollo, of course, but Faith will be busy becoming a big-time brand ambassador." Her voice cracked slightly on the last words. The comment section exploded. I stared at Daisy, completely blindsided. "We haven't discussed this yet," I said tightly, aware of hundreds watching our personal drama unfold in real time. "What's to discuss? It's your dream job." "Maybe we should finish this conversation privately," I suggested, reaching for the camera. "Why? Our whole relationship has played out for an audience. Why stop now?" There was something reckless in her tone I'd never heard before. "Daisy? I'm done," she announced, standing abruptly. "I'm done pretending this was ever going to last. I'm done setting myself up for another person to walk away." With that, she walked out of frame. The apartment door slammed seconds later with such force that the camera shook. Apollo whined from his bed in the corner, ears flat against his head. I stared blankly at the screen, at the hundreds of comments scrolling too fast to read, at the tiny reflection of my devastated expression in the camera lens. With numb fingers, I ended the live stream without a goodbye. The silence afterward was deafening. I spotted the music box still sitting on the coffee table, the grand gesture that would now go undelivered. With unsteady hands I opened it, letting the tinkling melody fill the empty apartment. That night I created a new cocktail, a spirit-forward, bitter concoction with no sweetness to balance it. I filmed myself making it, my movements mechanical, face expressionless. I titled the video Endings and uploaded it without description or tags, a digital message in a bottle sent into the void. It became my most viewed video ever. 3 days passed without word from Daisy. Our shared social accounts remained untouched, comments piling up with speculation and concern. I took double shifts at the bar to avoid my empty apartment, pouring drinks with robotic precision while my mind replayed our final interaction in endless loops. Then Apollo collapsed again. The call came during my shift, Daisy, her voice tight with panic. "It's happening again. The vet says it could be complications from the surgery." "I can't. I don't have." "I'm on my way," I said immediately, already untying my apron. Some things transcended heartbreak. When I arrived at the emergency vet clinic, the scene was hauntingly familiar. Same antiseptic smell, same uncomfortable chairs, same look of absolute terror on Daisy's face. Only this time, when our eyes met across the waiting room, there was no relief in hers, only resignation. as if she'd known all along that even this, us sitting together in crisis, was temporary too. "He's stabilized," the veterinarian reported, looking exhausted but cautiously optimistic. "We need to keep him overnight for observation. There's scar tissue from the original surgery that's causing complications." Daisy nodded mechanically, her fingers fidgeting with Apollo's leash, the one she'd brought in a desperate act of hope that she'd need it again. 3 hours we'd been sitting in that waiting room, barely speaking except to exchange essential information. "Thank you," she whispered to the vet, then turned to me. "You don't need to stay." The dismissal stung, but I understood it. I was already a ghost to her, someone who'd promised proximity only to announce their departure. "I'd like to," I said simply. She didn't argue, which I took as permission. We sat through another hour of silence, Daisy occasionally disappearing to check on Apollo through the observation window. When she was gone, I made a call. "Is this Kingsley Spirits? I'm calling about the job offer." By morning, Apollo was doing better, though the vet recommended another day of observation. Daisy looked hollowed out, running on nothing but fear and gas station coffee. "Go home and shower," I urged gently. "I'll stay with him. I promise to call if anything changes." After much persuasion, she finally agreed. Once she'd left, I pulled out my laptop and began drafting what would become the business plan for second chances, a concept that had been forming in my mind since that first night at the emergency vet nearly 2 months ago. When Daisy returned 3 hours later, Apollo had been cleared for discharge the following morning. Relief briefly animated her exhausted features before the careful mask of indifference slid back into place. "I declined the New York job," I said without preamble. Her head snapped up. "What? Why would you?" "I'm opening my own place, here in Durham." I pushed my laptop toward her. "A bar with an adoption center for rescue dogs, specialty cocktails named after success stories, events that raise money for animal medical care." She stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. "You're turning down Kingsley for a dog bar?" "For the right dog bar, for the right idea. For the right partner if she's interested." My voice remained steady despite my racing heart. Daisy looked away, that familiar withdrawal starting. "Don't make decisions based on me, Faith. I can't be responsible for your regrets." "This isn't about you," I lied. "Not entirely. It's about finding something that matters more than fancy titles or prestigious addresses." I hesitated. "Did you know I've been bartending since I was 21? 14 years of other people's recipes, other people's rules." She remained silent, but I could tell she was listening. "This would be mine. Ours if you want." I swallowed hard. "But I'm doing it either way." Later that evening, with Apollo stabilized and resting, I drove through a thunderstorm to the riverside park Daisy had once mentioned loving as a child. Lightning illuminated the swollen river in sporadic flashes as rain pelted sideways against my windshield. Finding her had been a guess, a desperate one. But there she was on a covered bench, staring out at the churning water. I sat beside her without speaking, water dripping from my hair onto my already soaked clothes. The storm's percussion around us was deafening, making conversation impossible. Instead, I reached into my pocket and placed the music box between us. Her body went completely still. With trembling fingers, she picked it up, running her thumb over the painted roses before slowly opening the lid. The tiny melody competed impossibly against the storm, audible only in the briefest pauses between thunderclaps. "How?" she finally asked, voice barely audible. "Flea market, the day we fought." Water streamed from my hair, down my face, indistinguishable from tears. Some things find their way back to where they belong. Her eyes met mine, searching for something. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of believing this could work. That you won't resent staying. That I won't wake up one day to find you gone." Each fear emerged like a confession. Rain pounded against the metal roof of the shelter. Lightning cracked again, illuminating her face, vulnerability laid bare in a way I'd never seen before. "I can't promise we won't hurt each other," I said honestly. "But I can promise I choose this, you, Apollo, our weird little internet fame, all of it, over anything New York could offer." The storm crescendoed around us as Daisy leaned forward, pressing her forehead against mine. Neither of us moved to close the final distance, just breathed the same air in this fragile moment of renegotiation. "Your car or mine?" she finally whispered. We ended up in my ancient Volvo, engine running for heat, windows completely fogged as rain hammered the roof. Words poured out between kisses, apologies, explanations, hopes, until talking gave way to something more primal. Her skin was cool from the rain but warmed quickly beneath my hands. Thunder punctuated our movements, the world reduced to this steamed-up sanctuary and the rhythm we created together. Afterward, wrapped in the emergency blanket I kept in my trunk, Daisy traced patterns on my collarbone. If we're really doing this bar thing, we need a better name than Second Chances. I laughed, the sound surprising us both. That bad, huh? Terrible, she confirmed, but her smile told a different story. She was already imagining it, already planning, already staying. 6 months passed in a blur of construction permits, liquor license applications, and late nights huddled over spreadsheets. We sold the rights to our Booze Babes name to a national spirits company for enough to cover the initial investment in what eventually became Second Chances Bar and Rescue in downtown Durham. What had begun as a desperate scramble to save Apollo had transformed into something neither of us could have imagined that rainy night, when Daisy first walked into the Copper Still. Opening night arrived on a crisp autumn evening. The space, once a neglected warehouse, now glowed with amber lighting and reclaimed wood. Behind the main bar, shelves held bottles interspersed with framed photos of successfully adopted dogs. The back patio had been converted into a comfortable dog play area, visible from most tables, currently housing 3 rescue pups awaiting forever homes. "We're actually doing this," Daisy whispered, squeezing my hand as the first customers began arriving. "Technically, they're here for Apollo's autograph, not our drinks," I teased. Our faithful companion, now fully recovered and unofficially promoted to Chief Canine Officer, lounged regally on his custom bed near the entrance, accepting adoration from patrons with dignified tolerance. Local press covered the opening, highlighting our journey from viral sensation to business owners. Former regulars from the Copper still showed up in support. Even Jennifer appeared briefly, offering a stiff congratulations before departing with her new girlfriend, her presence barely registering as the minor footnote she'd become in my story. By midnight, the soft opening was declared a success. After the last customer departed and staff finished cleaning, Daisy and I collapsed onto the small love seat in our office. "According to my calculations, we'll be profitable by." She squinted at her phone calculator. "The year 2087. I laughed, pulling her closer. "The adoption event next week will help. 3 local businesses already committed to sponsorships." She nodded against my shoulder, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Did you see how many people took adoption information packets?" Beth said 2 of the dogs might have matches already. Pride swelled in my chest, not just for the business, but for the woman beside me who'd thrown herself into this dream with the same fierce determination she applied to everything she loved. The following months brought challenges we hadn't anticipated. Winter storms caused pipe bursts. A supply chain issue left us scrambling for signature glassware. Our first employee quit without notice. But for every setback there were victories: 28 dogs placed in homes, glowing reviews in local publications, and most importantly, a growing community that gathered not just for drinks, but for the mission we represented. Spring brought unexpected news. A publisher interested in our story after a food blogger featured us in a viral article. Liquid Courage, Mixing Drinks and Finding Love, would become a cocktail book interwoven with our journey from that first thunderstorm to opening night. "They want us to do a mini tour," Daisy said, reading the email while absently scratching Apollo's ears. "Chicago, Atlanta, Portland. Road trip with my 2 favorite beings?" I pretended to consider it. "I suppose I could be persuaded." She rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress her smile. The book's surprise success among middle-aged women brought a new wave of visitors to Second Chances, many clutching copies for signatures, others simply curious about the couple who'd turned viral videos into something meaningful. On the anniversary of our first meeting, I closed the bar for a private event. Just us, Apollo, and the staff who'd become family. The cocktail shaker we'd fought over at the flea market held a place of honor behind the bar, now tarnished from regular use but cherished nonetheless. "I'd like to make a toast," I announced, once everyone had a glass in hand, "to Second Chances in all their forms." As glasses clinked, I caught Daisy's eye across the room. With practiced subtlety, I nodded toward the antique shaker. Her brow furrowed slightly in confusion until I gestured again, more insistently. She made her way behind the bar, lifting the shaker with curiosity. The small velvet box nestled inside hadn't been there during service. Her eyes widened as she opened it to reveal a vintage ring, not diamonds and flash, but a delicate band of twisted gold with tiny sapphires the color of the Durham sky at dusk. "You found this at a flea market too?" she asked, voice unsteady. I shook my head, joining her behind the bar. "Custom made, from the silver of that cocktail shaker's original lid that was too damaged to save. I kept the piece all this time." Around us, staff pretended not to watch, while obviously hanging on every word. "Faith Murphy, are you proposing to me in front of our employees and a bunch of rescue dogs?" "Technically, I'm proposing to you in front of our family," I corrected, taking the ring. "A family we built from scratch, just like everything else worth having." Apollo chose that moment to lumber over, resting his massive head on the bar between us, eyes moving expectantly from Daisy to me. "See? Even he's waiting for your answer," I laughed. Daisy's smile, the one I'd first seen in the candlelight of a power outage, broke across her face like sunrise. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes." As cheers erupted around us, she pulled me close. "Who would have thought a thunderstorm and a sick dog would lead to this?" "I'll thank that storm for the rest of my life," I murmured against her lips.